I sat in that room like a piece of furniture no one remembered buying. Leather chairs, polished wood table, bottled water lined up like soldiers. Everything felt too still, too staged. My younger brother, Travis, was sitting across from me, wearing that smug, relaxed grin he always wore when he thought he was about to win something. And truth be told, he usually did. Our parents flanked him like proud investors. The lawyer cleared his throat and handed Travis an envelope. "Per the instructions of Mr. Whitmore," he said, "you'll find details of the primary estate transfer enclosed." Travis opened it slowly, trying not to smirk. Inside was a summary: land deeds, accounts, property listings, all transferred to his name. Then Dad leaned back in his chair and looked at me. "You always said you wanted to make it on your own, Ray," he said, casual as can be. "Well, now you've got every reason to." I didn't say anything, didn't blink, didn't look down, because if I had, I'm not sure I could have swallowed the lump sitting in my throat. That's when the lawyer paused. "There is one more document," he said, reaching into his briefcase. It was a worn envelope, yellowed edges, my grandfather's name written in block letters. The moment he pulled it out, I felt the air shift. My mother's lips went tight. Dad's foot tapped against the floor. Travis stopped smiling. "I was instructed to read this aloud," the lawyer continued. He looked at me. "And Mr. Whitmore requested Raymond be present when this is done." I leaned forward, fingers curling around the arms of my chair. Whatever was inside that envelope, it wasn't just paper. It was something heavier, something real. And in that instant, I knew. My grandfather hadn't forgotten me, not like the rest of them did. I used to think silence meant peace. That was before I learned how silence can be used as a wall, a way to shut someone out without ever saying a word. Growing up, the only person who ever really talked to me like I mattered was my grandfather, Walter. Everyone else saw me as the quiet one, the one who fixed the broken fence without being asked, the one who never made a scene. Travis? He was the golden child, star athlete, high school prom king, the one who could charm the skin off a snake. My parents adored him, still do. It wasn't always bad between us. But somewhere along the way, admiration turned into competition, and I stopped playing a game I never signed up for. When I was 16, Grandpa let me turn the old chicken coop into a greenhouse. Said if I was going to spend all that time buried in books about soil and water balance, I might as well get my hands dirty too. We spent that whole summer building it. He taught me how to wire drip systems, rotate crops, even use vinegar and citrus peels as natural pesticides. Said real learning always comes with calluses. I kept a notebook, thick, leather-bound, with soil-smudged pages. Every time I figured something out, even a small thing, I'd write it down like it meant the world. When I got accepted to an agricultural sciences program out west, it was Grandpa who bought the plane ticket. My folks didn't even ask what I'd be studying. "You're wasting your time," my dad had said. "Ain't no future in playing with dirt." But Walter? He gave me a set of field journals and said, "You go learn how to grow things that last." I called every week, or tried to, but the calls stopped being returned. I came home one Christmas, only to find out they'd forgotten to tell me the family gathering had moved to Travis's house. I waited on the porch that night, gift in hand, wondering why no one showed. It didn't take long for the patterns to emerge. Travis would tell me Grandpa wasn't feeling well, that he was too tired for visitors. Mom would claim they tried calling, but maybe your number changed. I hadn't changed it. Not once since college. By the time I found out Grandpa had passed, The funeral had already happened. They said it was a scheduling mistake. Told me I could visit his grave alone if I wanted. He even tried calling my university housing office once, he told the lawyer later. They said I'd moved off campus, left no contact. Another lie he swallowed. And I did. But I stood there that day, staring at the headstone, thinking how strange it was to grieve someone who felt more alive in your memory than in the world that remained. I started pulling away after that, not out of anger, out of preservation, because every time I reached out, I felt more erased. They made me into the selfish one, the one who left, the one who didn't care. But deep down, I knew the truth. I just never thought I'd get to say it out loud, not until that envelope showed up. The lawyer took a deep breath before opening the envelope. His fingers moved carefully, like the paper inside might fall apart if handled wrong. I watched my mother lean forward just a bit, lips tight. My father stared down at the table. Travis looked annoyed, like someone had just interrupted his victory speech. "This is a letter from Mr. Walter Whitmore," the lawyer began, written 2 weeks before his passing. He cleared his throat. "To my grandson Raymond," he read, "if you're hearing this, then they finally opened the letter I made them promise not to ignore." I felt my breath catch. "I want you to know that I never stopped looking for you," it continued. "They told me you didn't want to come, that you'd moved on. But I never believed that, because I remember the boy who used to count rainfall in an old coffee can, who once told me dirt had memory." There was a pause. The room was completely still. "I tried calling. I wrote. I asked for you," the letter said. "When I didn't hear back, I worried I had done something wrong. But deep down, I feared someone else had done the wrong for me." My mother shifted in her seat. Dad's eyes darted to Travis. The lawyer kept going. "I want to leave you something," Grandpa's words continued. "Not out of guilt, not out of pity, but because you deserve a space where you don't have to explain why you care about the things you care about." He looked at me then, the lawyer. "Walter leaves the following to Raymond Foster," he said, lifting a second document. "Full ownership of the Whitmore research plot located on Laurel Bend Road, including its greenhouse structure, irrigation lab, soil testing equipment, and educational grant fund under Whitmore Agricultural Initiative." Travis snapped, "What the hell is that?" My dad said nothing, but my mother said, "That's the experimental property, the one Walter kept fussing with after retirement." Travis stood up. "Wait a minute. You're saying he gets that whole project? That was supposed to be folded into the estate. That's what we agreed." The lawyer held up a hand. "It was never part of the estate," he said firmly. "It was privately owned and designated by name, Raymond's name." Travis looked at me like I'd stolen something from him, but I hadn't stolen a thing. They just never thought I was worth remembering. The lawyer closed the letter and placed it gently on the table. "There's also a personal note," he said. "Mr. Whitmore asked that it be given to Raymond directly." He slid it across the table. I didn't open it right away. I waited until I was back in my truck, parked under the same oak tree where Grandpa used to sit and whittle toy boats from pine branches. The paper was thick, rough around the edges, ink slightly smudged from his left-handed scrawl. "Ray," it began, "this world doesn't always make space for people who move slow and think deep. But you kept going anyway. That's a strength most folks won't understand." He wrote about the day I built my first water system and flooded the back shed by accident. Said he kept the rusted pipe in his barn as a reminder that mistakes are just another kind of blueprint. He ended the letter with this: "I can't be there to walk beside you, but I hope this place will speak to you when you forget how to hear yourself. You don't owe this family anything, son, but you owe yourself the truth of who you are. Now go build something they can't ignore." I sat there a long while, reading that last line over and over, Now go build something they can't ignore. I wasn't sure what that meant just yet, but I knew where I had to go first. Laurel Bend Road. The first time I stepped onto Laurel Bend Road in over 20 years, it felt like trespassing. The gravel crunched under my boots the same way it used to when I'd walk out there after supper, chasing the last bit of light for my greenhouse notes. But the wind had changed. It didn't carry the scent of honeysuckle anymore, just dust and the weight of everything I didn't get to say. The gate was rusted, hanging off one hinge. I had to push hard to open it. The sign above it still read Whitmore Annex, but the paint was peeling, letters half gone. The place looked forgotten, like me. The greenhouse was still standing, though. Sun-warped panels, broken irrigation lines, weeds crawling through every crack. A corner of the roof had caved in, and one of the rain barrels had tipped sideways and split. I stood there for a long time, not moving, not thinking, just letting the ache rise. This was the space he left me, the space where I once believed everything was possible, and now it looked like a graveyard of good intentions. I found the old bench he built, the one where we used to sit and sketch plant cycles together. I sat down. My knees popped like old floorboards. I didn't mind. I opened Grandpa's letter again, smoothing the creases, reading that last line until it stopped hurting. Build something they can't ignore. I didn't cry. Not then. That came later. That night, I stayed in the old storage shed behind the greenhouse. It was musty, full of cobwebs, and barely held warmth, but it was mine. I made coffee with a camping stove, laid out my sleeping bag on a cot, and stared at the roof until sleep came in fits. I kept thinking about all the years they made me feel like I didn't belong, all the birthdays I spent alone, all the calls that went unanswered, the funeral I missed, the lies they stacked on top of each other until even Grandma stopped looking me in the eye. And I wondered how much of me they had to erase before they finally felt whole. The next morning, I found the notebook. It was inside a sealed metal box in the corner of the greenhouse, under a tarp and some brittle plywood. My old notebook. The same one I used back when I was 16, when I thought documenting bee pollination cycles and runoff patterns would impress someone. Grandpa had kept it. Every torn page, every awkward diagram. He'd even added a note on the last page. Never stop asking why. I sat on the concrete floor and cried like a grown man who had run out of excuses. That was the bottom for me. Not the silence, not the rejection, but realizing he'd never gotten to see what I became, and knowing I almost let them convince me I wasn't anything at all. I stayed at the annex for weeks. The first supplies came from the educational grant fund Grandpa set up. Just enough for tarps, a few basic tools, and canned beans. Dignity felt like a luxury I couldn't afford yet. Didn't call anyone. Didn't tell the bank or the post office or the folks back at my old rental where I'd gone. It was like I had stepped out of time. But slowly, I started to move. I cleared the brush, repaired the irrigation line, replaced the roof panels one by one. It didn't fix the pain, but it gave me something to hold. Grief, I've learned, is loud when you don't give it work to do. Every day I fixed something, I felt a little less buried, and a little more like myself, the version of me he believed in, the one who counted raindrops and built systems just to see if they'd hold, the one they stopped seeing, but he never stopped loving. A month later, I found a letter wedged inside a drawer of Grandpa's old desk. It wasn't addressed to anyone, just a single line on the front, "For when you're ready." Inside was a list, sloppy handwriting, ink smudges, his usual style. The top said, "Ideas for Phase 2." And below that, drawings, notes on integrating solar irrigation, suggestions for community outreach, even rough plans for turning the annex into an education site for local schools. He'd dreamed further than I ever knew. That's when I stopped just fixing the place. I started building it. I reached out to 2 former students I used to mentor through an extension program, Ari and Kevin. Both were still in agriculture, looking for work with purpose. They showed up with boots, grit, and more belief in me than I had in myself. We started small, clearing brush, installing new lighting, testing old lab equipment. The greenhouse came back to life, slowly, awkwardly, beautifully. I remember the day we planted our first row of test crops, drought-resistant heirloom tomatoes. I stood there with dirt under my nails, the kind of tired that feels like satisfaction, and thought, this is what he meant. This is what can't be ignored. The annex became our second home. We built classroom modules, set up a rainwater collection system, created a seed-sharing program with local farmers. People started visiting, asking questions, sharing stories. Some of them had never stepped inside a lab before. Some were retirees. Some were kids who thought science was just something in a textbook they couldn't understand. But in that space, it became real. We called the project Field and Mind, a place where knowledge met soil. One afternoon, after we got our first community grant, I found myself alone in the greenhouse. The sun poured in through the panels just right, warming the floor. I pulled out Grandpa's letter again, the first one. Read it all the way through, and I realized something. He never told me what to do. He just gave me permission to do it, to grow, to take up space, to stop apologizing for how I'm built. It hit me then. Maybe healing after betrayal doesn't always come in the form of closure. Sometimes it comes in motion, in planting something new, in showing up even when the story says you're supposed to vanish. That's what I was doing. And maybe, for the first time in my life, it was enough. 3 years later, Travis showed up. I was in the middle of laying out compost beds with a group of students when one of them came running up, breathless. "There's a man at the gate," she said. "Looks like he doesn't know if he should be here." I walked out, wiping my hands on my jeans. And there he was, still tall, still dressed like he wanted to be noticed, but smaller somehow. His shoulders had folded inward, like the world finally gave him something he couldn't talk his way out of. "Ray," he said. I nodded. "Travis." He looked past me at the greenhouse, the kids laughing in the soil beds, the signs that read things like, "Start small, grow steady." "I didn't know it turned into all this," he said. "I didn't offer a tour, didn't invite him in, but I didn't close the gate either." He shoved his hands in his coat pockets. "I lost the last of the business, the house too. Guess it all caught up." I waited. No judgment, no pity, just space. "I was wondering," he said slowly, "if there's anything I can do here. Volunteer, learn." It would have been easy to say no, to throw back everything he took, everything they all did. But I didn't. I pointed to the back compost lot. "We're short one person hauling mulch. Gloves are in the bin." He blinked. For a second I saw it. Not regret, maybe, but the shadow of the kid who used to help me drag lumber for the coop before the world told him winning was everything. Then nodded. Didn't say thank you. Just walked to the bin, grabbed a pair, and got to work. He didn't try to explain himself. Didn't apologize either. But he kept showing up. Twice a week. Quiet. Present. Over time, the students stopped asking who he was. To them, he was just another set of hands. And that was fine by me. Grandma lives with me now. She's slower than she used to be, memory fading in patches, but every morning we have coffee in the sunroom. She still remembers the day Grandpa proposed under the oak tree out back. Still tells me I look like him when I laugh. Sometimes we sit on the bench by the annex field and just watch the light shift across the soil. "You did it," she says every now and then. And I smile. Because yeah, I did. Not to prove anything. Not to fix what they broke. But to grow something new in its place. The past doesn't disappear. But it doesn't get to define me either. Not anymore. Not every story ends with a grand apology. Sometimes, the only closure you get is the one you give yourself. For a long time, I thought if I worked hard enough, stayed quiet enough, proved myself enough, maybe they'd finally see me. But I was chasing something that was never mine to earn. What I've learned is this: some people can only love in the shape that fits them. And if you don't match it, they'll fold you until you break. But you don't have to break. You can bend. You can grow. You can walk away. And you can build a life so rooted in truth that no one gets to rewrite your story but you. If this hit close to home, if you've ever been the forgotten one, the quiet one, the one who kept showing up even when it hurt, you're not alone. And you're not invisible. Thanks for listening to mine. If this story meant something to you, leave a comment below. Tell us what part stayed with you, or just say hi. I read every message. And if you're walking your own healing journey, hit subscribe. There's room for you here. Always has been.